Good morning. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Today we are on Lesson 10 of the Epistle to the Hebrews, and we're covering Hebrews chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. This one's called High Priest and the Cities of Refuge. Jesus, as our high priest, is one of the most important aspects of the book of Hebrews. And though high priest has been mentioned in earlier chapters, that term is entering the focus of the book now. First, let's discuss three roles of Jesus, which is different from any other man to walk this earth. Aaron, the brother of Moses, was the first high priest. He was 3 years older than Moses, from the tribe of Levi, and God named the tribe of the Levites priests. While Aaron was the high priest, there were many priestly duties surrounding the tabernacle, and later the temple, and these were always assigned to Levites. We also see another man mentioned in this chapter of Hebrews who had also been a priest, Melchizedek. The Greek pronunciation is Melchizedek, and the Hebrew pronunciation is Melchizedek. I will use Hebrew, though most people are more familiar with the Greek pronunciation. His name means king, Melek in Hebrew, and righteousness, tsedek in Hebrew. Put those two words together, and his name means the King of Righteousness. He is first mentioned in Genesis when Abraham returned from the War of the Kings, including the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, before God completely destroyed those cities. Genesis chapter 14, verses 17 through 20 says this, "And the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh," that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer, and the kings who were with him. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And he gave him a tithe of all. In addition to the King of Righteousness, we see that Melchizedek is identified as the King of Salem. Salem, in Hebrew, is shalom, meaning peace. So he is both the King of Peace, the King of Righteousness, and he also is a priest of the Most High God. In fact, Abraham paid a tithe to Melchizedek. It is also interesting that Melchizedek brings bread and wine. It makes me think of the miracles of Jesus at the wedding at Cana and the feeding of the multitudes, but also that Jesus is the bread of life and the vine. Certainly, this could be a foreshadowing of the Last Supper, the Seder on the night before the death of Jesus, when he taught them the significance of his body and his blood for all Christians to come. We also should note that in the Middle East, this meal was a symbol of peace, fellowship, and hospitality. The next time we see Melchizedek in the Bible is in a short, interesting psalm by King David. Psalm 110, verses 1 through 7 says this, "The Lord said to my Lord, 'Sit at my right hand, till I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people shall be volunteers in the day of your power and the beauties of holiness. From the womb of the morning you have the dew of your youth. The Lord has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He shall execute kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the nations. He shall fill the places with dead bodies. He shall execute the heads of many countries. He shall drink of the brook by the wayside. Therefore he shall lift up the head." In this prophetic psalm, God the Father was speaking to God the Son, Jesus, telling him to sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. Though Jesus sits at the right side of the Father even now, it seems that this points to a time after the resurrection and return to heaven of Jesus. At that time, Jesus will return to earth as the conquering king, whom the Jews were anticipating in the first coming of the Messiah, in judgment. Surprisingly, when most people picture this, they're looking at the face of Jesus and picture him at the right in the picture. If he's sitting on the right of the Father, though, picture him on the left if looking at Jesus face to face. The Father goes on to tell Jesus that he will be a priest forever, though the book of Hebrews elevates this to being the high priest forever, both according to the order of Melchizedek. There are some Bible scholars who believe that Melchizedek was an Old Testament appearance of Jesus, a Christophany. But to me, Melchizedek was a real man, real king, and real priest who worshiped God and pointed forward to Jesus. So Aaron was a priest, Melchizedek was a king and a priest, and Jesus is a prophet, a king, and a priest. Let's summarize this just a bit. A prophet speaks to man for God, while a priest speaks to God for man. And certainly a king rules over the people. Only Jesus has these three roles. He came to earth as a man and was born into the tribe of Judah, and thus could not have been a Levite priest. But he became a man so that he could speak to man and speak the words of God as a prophet. As a priest, a high priest, Jesus sits at the right hand of the Father and represents us to God. He covered our sins with his precious blood, became the mediator between man and God. He's an intercessor for man. When Satan, the accuser of the brethren, makes accusations against believers, Jesus is there to intercede on our behalf, telling God that sin already has been paid for and that he's the one who paid the price. And we cannot forget that he is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. Let's get a taste of Hebrews 5 before we take a little journey down a rabbit hole. Hebrews chapter 5 verses 1 through 6 says this: For every high priest taken from among men is appointed for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness. Because of this, he is required, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer sacrifices for sins. And no man takes this honor to himself, but he who is called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, You are my son, today I have begotten you. And he also says in another place, You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Let's discuss another important aspect of a high priest. He served in that role for the remainder of his life. When the children of Israel crossed the Jordan River and came into the promised land, 2.5 tribes decided to remain east of the Jordan: Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. The other tribes entered the land, and all the remaining tribes but one were part of a lottery of the parcel of land they would be given. This included all tribes except for the Levites. Instead of title to land, God was the inheritance for the tribe of Levi. To see this, read Deuteronomy 18 and Numbers 18. But the Levites did receive 6 cities of refuge. In today's vernacular, we might call them sanctuary cities. But the purpose involved those who had been accused of manslaughter. First, let's understand the difference between manslaughter and murder. And the key word is intent. If 2 of us are out chopping wood and my axe head slips off the handle and kills my friend, I could be responsible for not checking my axe closely enough before using the axe. But there certainly was no intent. This describes an accident, a horrible accident. Relatives of the deceased, though, might not see it that way. The person accused of manslaughter was instructed to hurry to one of the 6 cities of refuge. Once inside, he was guaranteed to remain safe. And here's an interesting statement. He was allowed to remain in that city until the high priest died. When the high priest died, a new high priest would take his place. But the man who had committed manslaughter was no longer protected. Hopefully, the immediate anger of the deceased man's relatives would have subsided, but the law no longer protected the guilty man. This is not a haven for murderers, for those who killed people in anger, or for any other intentional reason. This passage also gives us some more pertinent information. Joshua chapter 20, verses 1 through 9 says this. The Lord also spoke to Joshua, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Appoint for yourselves cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses, that the slayer who kills a person accidentally or unintentionally may flee there, and they shall be your refuge from the avenger of blood. And when he flees to one of those cities, and stands at the entrance of the gate of the city, and declares his case in the hearing of the elders of that city, they shall take him into the city as one of them, and give him a place, that he may dwell among them. Then if the avenger of blood pursues him, they shall not deliver the slayer into his hand, because he struck his neighbor unintentionally, but did not hate him beforehand. And he shall dwell in that city until he stands before the congregation for judgment, and until the death of the one who was high priest in those days. Then the slayer may return and come to his own city and his own house, to the city from which he fled. So they appointed Kadesh in Galilee and the mountains of Naphtali, Shechem in the mountains of Ephraim, and Kirjath Arba, which is Hebron, in the mountains of Judah. And on the other side of the Jordan, by Jericho eastward, they assigned Bezer and the wilderness on the plain. From the tribe of Reuben, Ramoth in Gilead, from the tribe of Gad, and Golan in Bashan, from the tribe of Manasseh. These were the cities appointed for all the children of Israel, and for the stranger who dwelt among them, that whoever killed a person accidentally might flee there, and not die by the hand of the avenger of blood, until he stood before the congregation. This is one of those passages that when we are reading through the entire Bible, we get a little bogged down, as it seems so tedious and does not give us any interpretation or application of how this possibly could affect us today. But let's look at one important verse in the New Testament that ties this together. Luke chapter 23, verses 32 through 34 says this, There were also 2 others, criminals, led with him to be put to death. And when they had come to the place called Calvary, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right hand and the other on the left. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And they divided his garments and cast lots. Who is responsible for the death of Jesus on the cross? Well, all of us. The Jewish authorities pushed an agenda to kill Jesus for blasphemy. Romans physically completed the task by crucifying Jesus. Don't forget the crowd that could have released Jesus, but chose to release Barabbas instead. We also should not forget the scoffers at the cross, making fun of Jesus for claiming to be the Son of God, but not saving himself by jumping off the cross. What many may continue to overlook is that Jesus could have done that, but chose to remain on the cross as it was what he came to accomplish. If he saved himself, he could not have saved us. There are many anti-Semitic Christians who wrongly blamed the Jews for the death of Jesus, somehow forgetting that it was what Jesus came to do. And they also overlook our personal parts in the death of Jesus. But it was my sin that put Jesus there, your sin, the sins of all of mankind. We are all responsible. Notice an important phrase in this verse. Jesus asked the Father to forgive us, for they know not what they do. In that moment, Jesus judged us all, not as guilty of murder, but as guilty of manslaughter, because there was no intent. Certainly, they all intended to kill Jesus, but perhaps without the real understanding that they were killing the God who came to save us all. Jesus, interestingly, did not hold them responsible for murder, but for manslaughter. Just as the instructions of the Old Testament passages concerning the cities of refuge, those of us guilty of manslaughter, that's all of us, can escape to a city of refuge. As Christians, our refuge is in Jesus. We are in him, and he is in us. Heaven also will be a city of refuge, and a gated community at that. We are protected there until the death of the high priest. But there's another bit of good news for us. Jesus, the high priest, never will die, and Jesus will be high priest forever. We just have to get to that refuge, and we do that by asking Jesus into our hearts and following him. This is Garry Glaub in Mooresville, North Carolina. Have a blessed day.